Hello.
Welcome everyone to another AZ Ray video. Today I am honored to have a very cool guest next to me. We have Reina Baez with here. And today we're going to talk about an amazing film that you guys heard me talk about over and over again on this channel, The Substance. Reina is an amazing therapist. She's part of Libertad Counseling. She works with all kinds of people with various backgrounds, works with immigrants, works specializes in marriages and families, also talks about people with all kinds of different backgrounds. And what better person to talk about this very mind-blowing explosion like film, The Substance, than an awesome therapist, Reina Baez. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
So, just overall, just give me give me your thoughts on this film because there's a lot to say about it, right? So yeah, what are your overall thoughts and impressions about it, just in general?
I think when I watch things, the reason I became a therapist is because the way I conceptualize the world is just, based on human behavior. And I'm always asking, why do people do things? Which is why I love the work that I do so much. And so I think this movie really takes a deep dive into a lot of different things around identity. Um, I, I think women's issues are not uh issues maybe isn't the right word, but the way women are, the way women perceive themselves, the pressure they have to be a certain way, to look a certain way, it's just kind of a given. It's not given much thought, and impacts, and the impact of society's messaging and narratives. Just I know a lot of women specifically, and men, and really anybody can have those thinking patterns about, like, this doesn't feel right, but they don't have the language, or they don't think that it'll be accepted, and so they don't talk about it, and so those things stay silent. And so I think this movie does a really nice job of very dramatically bringing to light. I'm not much of a gore person, so Arturo knows this really took me by surprise. But I'm glad that I saw it, because if I would have just been stuck on, like, this is there, you're gonna see, it's gonna be visually something that is hard for me personally to watch, I wouldn't have gotten the other value. Yeah, so that's my kind of general overview.
No, appreciate your insight, and yeah, the gore. It's definitely done on purpose to like aggressively convey the message, right? And no, absolutely. Like one of the big themes, hence the background that we have here of Elizabeth falling down after the first time that she takes a substance. Spoiler alert, though, if you guys didn't get that, by the way, spoiler alert. We're probably gonna get into some spoilers. And going back to what we're talking about is, I wanted to focus on the concept of the stage, right? Because I think the film does this very well, especially on these like white tile scenes. We have like the bathroom, and then we have the room where she gets her substance injection, the little suitcase. Like they all have this like stage like element to it, right? Because I know this film sometimes gets picked on that it's very like exploitative towards women, but I think people are missing the message. I don't think it's just
Mhm.
trying to like, oh, we're having nudity for the sake of nudity. I think it's just the
Mm.
quiet. I think it's the quiet stage that like people give themselves when they look in the room, and like how she's looking at herself and she's looking at her body, right? And it's like this like stage kind of presence, because it's like it's our private moment before we go out to the world, right? And so it's like our last little moment of what we think to ourselves, and whether we know it or not, right? That's like our reality. That's our world. So I would love to get your feedback about. I know you touched on it too, right? Because sometimes we can't even articulate that, right? It's part of our daily routine, what we do in the restroom or what we do to get ourselves ready for the day.
A lot of times women don't even look at themselves. They can't even be with any of it. It's interesting what you said. I haven't read reviews of this movie. So what you said about people saying it exploits women, I mean, 100% no. I don't think the nudity's point is at all uh to be exploiting women. I think it shows a vulnerability. And Obviously, Demi Moore is a beautiful woman. Um, and I'm sure she looks drastically different naked now than she did when she was 25. And it would be interesting. I have not seen her in any interviews around this, so but I'd be interested to hear like if she speaks on, maybe you've seen something Arturo where she speaks on how she feels different about her body or how she felt going through this process. I imagine that she had some input, like being a seasoned actress, right? About like her experiences going from, being in her 20s and now maybe getting typecasted in a different way. Um, I imagine it might come from some of that. But yeah, exploiting, I did not have that thought for a second. I thought more vulnerable and I think it would be really hard. I don't, how often do you see women, I think she's in her early 60s, or late 50s. Late,
Something like that. We could check. But yeah, no, either way, yeah, you're right. It's not a normal scene that's put out there, right? It's not quote
no,
unquote, yeah.
no, it's not
60,
like,
yeah, 62, nice.
yeah,
Showing
yeah.
off.
Right. So, I mean, that's not like something that we consider to be, oh, super sexy. Right. Like, you know, and again, she's a beautiful woman and yeah, I'd be curious what it was like for her
No,
too.
sure. Yeah. No, what do you think about the idea of like the whole stage element? Do you think there's like how we are in the inside world or in the outside world? Like what would you think about that like on a psychological perspective? Do you think the relationship that a intimate person has like in the restroom stage versus the outside
Um,
stage, you think they play a role?
sure. Um, yeah, I mean, what I was saying about some women not even looking at themselves or like, yeah, if the conversation that she has internally, even the young woman, right?
Yes,
Um,
Sue, Margaret Qualley's character, yeah.
yeah, yeah, even I mean, she's getting amazing feedback from the outside world, right? Like, "You're so beautiful." So, right, that narrative comes from the outside world, so then she could very comfortably own that if she believed the outside world, but we don't really know what her experiences have been. Was she always so traditionally beautiful, right? Speaking of those, yeah, the bathroom, the internal, conversations that we have when we're not out in the world. But I would argue that the internal and the external worlds, you hear from the external world whatever is happening in your internal world. Like that how you actually look is not really not always doesn't always mirror what internally is going on, right? um People could think you're traditionally very beautiful as a woman, but then you feel like you see every little imperfection.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very well put. No, of course, of course. Yeah, yeah, validation, right? How people want to they hear what they get to and how you process things. Well, that's definitely a giant like rabbit hole within it is. I understand that the concept of the substance isn't real technically, right? Or since it's a fictional movie, right? But do you think the substance is real? Do you think it could represent a couple of different things, or what do you think one of the messages that the film is trying to say when it's talking about like this substance and this like magical thing that'll help make things better?
Yeah, I guess for me it was never something that could really happen, right? It's just too weird, like how could somebody have that happen like without some level of consent, I guess, at the beginning, right? And then she agreed to do it, right? But it was still like bizarre, right? Because the I guess he was a doctor, right? And then it shows that he was an older man and all of that, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess to me, I saw it all very metaphorically. Um, how how the substance can infiltrate us through again, like people's messaging, society's messaging, right? Whether we choose to take the substance or not, whether we choose to like keep alive, like take the nourishment that is, that we have to take in order to keep alive, or if we prefer to like avoid and lie and little parts of us die and atrophy. Um, yeah, I did not see it like I couldn't see it as a literal thing at all. Like there would be some level of, yeah.
Yeah, after watching it again the second time, I definitely had a similar takeaway, but then I kind of thought about it more that like I guess on a general thing, I think the substance in itself could represent just like a general substance. Like it could be drugs, it could be alcohol.
Mm.
And although it doesn't make you a better form of yourself, right? But it may think that you are, right? It might give you that escape, right? It might give you that like
Mm.
I could be stretching it there, but that's just kind of what I perceived a little bit. I know Carly Farge on some interviews, the director talked about how like I think she said that one of the symbols could be interpreted as like potentially. I think she said either quaaludes or some kind of like weight loss like contributing thing, which is always something that's like forced down women's throats, but also men too, right? With we're seeing more and more. There's like a lot of performance enhancing drugs and steroids in like the Hollywood industry, and the expectations of both males and female figures are just not what they were back then, right? Everyone's expected to have like these ridiculous amount of like abs and like definition on their bodies and stuff like that. So that's like probably like one level to dissect it. But yeah, it was just a thought. Just I was just interpreting as like the substance being like it could be a lot of things technically, right? But I know what you're saying. Like, is there something that can make us like a younger, better us? Like, no, probably not. I hope not. That sounds super creepy. With the like meiosis, mitosis thing rips apart and becomes another thing like that. Yeah,
No, I'm glad you brought up like the semaglutides uh and all of that, because I've done a lot of work around that. And when they first came out, I was really concerned. I was like, ugh. So the thought did cross my mind. Actually, I forgot that I thought about the substance being like that for women and men, sure. I was thinking, what are the mental health impacts of this? If this really, you could just take something and it will, it can make everyone on an even playing field in terms of, being able to not, have obesity be an issue, right? And because to me it's like that, that's a coping strategy, is to overeat essentially, right? And to have, and then that changes, you being a worthy acceptable woman if you have the wrong amount of weight on your body, whatever that means by society standard at the moment, shifts and changes. So I did actually think about that, how the substance could be like that new class of drugs that people are taking a lot
sure. No, no, yeah. No, no. Thanks again for your insight. That was a cool takeaway. No, yeah, your comments also make me think about something else, right? Because every time when Elizabeth's character is freaking out because Sue's doing all these things that are like not in her consent, she keeps misunderstanding that they're not the same person, right? We have all these like symbolism that show us that Sue's a dragon. That's who she is, right? She has her dragon robe. She puts on her suit when she's trying to go to hook up with some dude, and like it kind of has like a reptile kind of scale, right? She even refers to Elizabeth on a talk show interview as a dinosaur. Dinosaurs are believed to be what people interpreted as dragons back then. So like there's this theme that she's like a dragon, right? That she's like animal, right? You can get Freudian, right? She's like the id, she's like the animalistic side of what a person is, but it's still a person, right? When people, I feel like sometimes they maybe have I know I've dealt with it, as like someone involved in therapy as well too, how like sometimes we feel like we have like a darkness to us or some kind of other side, but it's still the same side. So I was curious to hear your like psychological interpretation of like what Elizabeth represents and what Sue represents, right? And they're technically the same person, and they literally got split apart, but they are it's like this, they're the same person, right?
of. Yeah, and I think it's funny. This might not make it onto the, but have you ever seen the SNL? Did you ever watch SNL?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you know the alien one with Kate McKinnon.
Ye
where they have the and then she's like, "I didn't see any of that." She's like, "I don't know where you were." Like, I'm like the dragon, like that. But so because I see things very much in the same, and maybe because I knew that I was going to talk to you about it from like my more professional stance, like, but I think this is how I conceptualize things regardless. Yeah, I like it can, I think it for women based on like talking doing therapy with a lot of women and even for myself, it's like the younger version of you sometimes can feel like that's no longer who you are. It can feel like a different person. Like you look at pictures, you're like, wait, I used to look like that, or like I was like that. And like in two ways, it's like, oh, like I was still ridiculously hard on how I looked, at that point, like if only, right, I would have appreciated it, right? Messaging like that, right? Or like I remember when I was in grad school, one of my professors said that she reached an age where she could no longer use her looks to like get things, right? And this was a psychologist, but I think about that often. I'm like, do I ever use looks, right? To like, in whatever way, right? And like, will there be like a death in that way? Right. And similarly, like she lost her job, right, in the movie because she no longer fit a certain model and mold, right? And so her identity was completely in question, you know. Um, But then it's also like, I mean, I remember seeing her apartment in the movie first time. I was like, "Ooh, that's sweet. Like, I love it." But then on the other side, it became such like a dark place, And then it's like, I don't know. Like, is it really? Is it? Is it? Is it good to have things that look so good, right? Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, sure. I could. I realize I'm a man talking, but I did grow up with a lot of sisters and whatnot. But either way, as a yeah, it's to have that relationship with like the younger self and like nostalgia within itself is probably its own drug too. To like even like reminisce, to go into the past and stuff. Yeah, that's its own thing. But yeah, that could be its own video within itself. So, but yeah, I think it's interesting the relationship between Elizabeth and Sue because I think if as we alluded to earlier, right? And you're talking about like her procedure, and she definitely wasn't psychologically well, right? She had all kinds of depression or things going on with her, and things playing with her mind, right? I honestly think that like Sue is probably like the unresolved things within her. And it's
Mm,
why she was quote unquote like dragon or more animalistic or more, maybe in some ways more intense and aggressive, but not in the way that quote unquote a male would probably be. Maybe more in the sense that like she's using her power, whether it's her sexual prowess, to like to get what she needs to get done, and like her level of success and whatnot, right? So it's interesting too, and it's to go on like the whole aging thing as well too, right? She gets fired when she's 50, and like how they make her almost have like a witch like element, and I really
yeah.
don't like to use that word, but I think it's an effective word because it's a kind of a word that's been like shamed towards women, and like it's like not even that different when you see what's going on with like women who are having to go with like sexual assault trials, right? Like Amber Heard, right? She's almost, and she was even called like a witch in the trial, right? It's almost like they're out to get like these like particular type of women and these like women of power and stuff. And it's like, I guess because Elizabeth Sue didn't meet the quote unquote, I don't know, she was 50 and apparently that's unconceivable. Like, no, you can't be doing stuff like that. Not that it even matters, right? And then you see like all the jerk dudes, right? And like most of them kind of look the same. And they're kind of generic background suit people that are just being pigs and being like just reinforced to be pigs, right? But yeah, just the whole like yeah, the whole gender thing and the whole aging thing. It's yeah, it's very real, you know.
I think,
I've heard people
yeah.
talk about this, and they say they limit to that this has to do with like people saying that like the director hates Hollywood, and she probably does, But I think this is a bigger I don't think we're just talking about Hollywood Wheel. I think she's, like, calling out society in general. And that's why when I think about, like, Sue and Elizabeth, going back to, like, my earlier point, yeah, they're definitely the same person. I think people have duality to them. I think you can feel like, maybe, like, depressed, alone, older, and lonely, but you could also have, like, a fun, more giddier side to you as well too, and maybe a more youthful energy. It doesn't mean, like, you're not the same person.
Mhm.
Yeah, I rambled for a bit. I apologize for that.
Oh, no.
What are your thoughts?
There were 2 things that came up. I had an image of the neighbor that came up, and, like, he was, like, reacted to her in a totally different way, and how as women age, they become invisible, you know, um, and are just treated differently. And then on the other thought I had was, like, you said that she had, like, these psychological issues and she was depressed and whatever. I was like, "Oh, no, she seemed totally normal to me." I don't know if that's just because I'm a therapist, but, like, to me, I was like, that given her circumstances, like, you know, and I think isolation, I'm glad that the director called it out, because, like, that's the number one predictor of depression, you know? And, like, thinking of that more, it's it's like she relied on her career and her looks and all of that, and she didn't seem like she focused on connections and other things with people that, like, really, like, those things don't change with age. You might change, you change, you have different relationships and all of that, but those things don't. Those things can age very nicely, and don't, those things are what keeps you healthy, really. And I always argue, like, if you see, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's really interesting. When I was in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico, and I lived there, I went and did some work in one of the ranchos, and it was a town. It was specifically a town where, maybe you're much more familiar with this than me, but they had the same last name multiple times, right? Because families would just keep marrying and marrying, and then it was just a town pretty much full of women and children, because all of their spouses had come to the United States, and they had abandoned the families, though. So and these women looked, I was in my early 30s at the time. I thought they were double my age. They were younger or the same age as me, and they had had such hard lives and had been abandoned and hadn't they looked physically so much older than anyone I'd ever seen, and I thought, "Wow." Like, how psychology can also play into looks. It's like, I'll never forget that, because it blew my mind when I found out. I was like, "Wait, how old are you?" How and it made me feel like,
Wow.
God, I've had so much privilege, you know?
No, yeah, abandonment. Yeah, you definitely hit on something for sure. When she's in the cafe and bumps into other elderly people, right?
Mm,
And, like, the trauma that they go through, there's definitely a level of abandonment, right? 'Cause but then it's trippy because in a way they literally abandon themselves, right? Their younger self abandon, like, their older self, or them abandoning, like, within themselves the fact that they can't even, like, stop taking this substance, right? Like, how the
yeah,
first time
could have
she
chosen.
stops.
Yeah, with the finger, right? She could have chosen. Right? And she couldn't. Yeah, it's like, it can be addictive, maybe looking at, like, doing lots of different plastic surgeries or whatever, right? It's like, that can be addictive, or it's like, and where does the line blur from being like it's healthy to it gets unhealthy, right? And it's hard. Like, probably it's unhealthy at any point if your finger looks like that, I would argue. But, like, the first plastic surgery, maybe you don't, but then, like, when people start looking disfigured and they don't look attractive at a certain point, in my opinion, right? But they can't stop, right? Super interesting.
Yeah, why do you think she didn't go on that date with the guy?
Why didn't you go on the date with the guy? No, I think it was probably insecurity at the root of it, that she didn't feel Yeah, that she didn't feel integrated enough in herself to even know how to interact. What do you think?
See, see that I feel like to me, but you're the therapist. What do I know? I
Oh,
think
no, we're both
listen, like
humans.
I think that's my first indicator of her being psychologically unwell. Cause like
Mm,
she was fine. Her gloves thing, her makeup, her outfit, she was good to go. You know what I mean? And then for her to go that extreme and she's like literally claws her face off like a quote unquote dragon, right?
okay, yeah, that's that yeah, I mean, I guess I can't take that to be because I guess I separate that from being like totally not possible, right? So I can't even go psychologically unwell with that. I'm just like like that's so much, right? Obviously, if you're clawing your feet, there's a level of like, okay, maybe it's time for hospitalization, right? If a client tells me that they're doing that, I'm like, okay, well, it's 5150, and I'd be very concerned, right? So I guess that's where I separate, where I can't see it as I have a hard time still being with that. I could just too distracted.
No, yeah, no, of course. But and I guess even if we don't want to even take her clawing on her face literal, I'm sure people do that whether they're actually doing that, right? Like they're picking on every
Skin
little
picking.
thing or
Oh
like
yeah, literal skin picking.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
literal. Yeah, no, I mean, so many women and men I know do this. You could say this in a multiple ways, right? And like to your point, right? I am not used to that level of gore, so for me, it's distracting because I'm not desensitized to it. But uh, yeah, if I remove that, then I think, okay, right? Like this is meant to be I can liken it to like skin picking or things that I've worked with people a lot on that are, just ways to cope with
No,
anguish and angst.
sure, sure. And then yeah, that opens up other stuff too about even like makeup and stuff. Not that makeup isn't a bad thing, but sometimes people like how they express it, whether it's like a mask or not a mask, or people are just way too hard on themselves
Yeah,
on when
if
they're
yeah,
yeah,
if they're like, I need to cover up, if they're focusing on like every imperfection versus like, oh, it's fun, or like, oh,
exactly.
right? It's like there's always a line, and it's very individual and it's all how the intention behind it, you know. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, yeah. I was just curious because, like, that's in my opinion, that's like the beginning of the close, like the dive.
Mhm.
Like, oh, she didn't go on that date, and then everything just like domino effects, and that's why I made the earlier witch comment. I wish I didn't say it, but it's too late. It's out there.
I don't see that as a bad thing.
Yeah, I know it's
When
a
you were
heavy
saying
word
you hate
though.
to use that word, why do you hate it so much?
Well, I know there's a weight to it, and
Why?
but I know women. I've been trying to use it as a form of empowerment, but it
Me?
also reminds me too the way like she was like depicted and when she's like trying to stress eat and make all those meals and the ingredients on there like or her steps were like like you get another clue for me that she was like psychologically unwell. It says like ravage and viscerate every piece. I'm like, I doubt that's what the direction said.
Well, yeah, I don't know why which with the W, right? Not with the B. Yeah, I
Yes,
don't see it
yes,
as maybe
no, yes,
I maybe it's
yes.
showing my age a little,
Hey,
but I
either
have
either one, yeah, but no, I
I
was
have
double.
no bad association with the witch with the W. Like to me, it's like I have visions of like, yeah, like growing up with Disney movies and seeing, witches as evil characters, right? And so I don't have personally any reaction to that. Other people may, but
Okay, yeah, yeah, okay,
I
but
don't know. This could be something that I'm just not aware of that people.
yeah.
You said people have reclaimed it, or I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, just like the Wiccan and like the Wicca movements kind of coming back, and
Oh
it
yeah.
it does have like positive roots. A lot of people of like Scott Irish or like British descent. It's a similar sort of like native cleansing and people using like herbal medicine, homeopath. It's like it's not as trippy as people may think. And most of the time, people that were
Oh yeah.
accused of witches were because women that had to like could inherit wealthy estates, right? And just like political influence, and then guys being just horrible like predators too, right? There's like a bunch of layers to it. But the other reason I bring it up too is because it's also like it's given like a negative depiction, right? And why did Demi Moore look so scary in that scene, right? It was just because she looked older and her aggressive and I guess kind of witch like, right?
Well,
Some I don't
she
know.
looks scary, but I think it was partially. I kind of feel like if you own whatever stage you are in life, like it's not scary. So I think if she wouldn't have been so isolated and like hidden from herself, I don't think she would have even, physically aging. Like it's part of life, you know.
Absolutely.
Um, so
Absolutely. Yeah. And then final witch comment too, like yeah, like and all these examples too, they're mostly like people like of power, and it's an empowerment thing to be at peace, right? And like self-love is also like the hidden like thing
sure.
about the film too, right? It's like it's I think so.
I wonder if your witch stuff do you think it comes from like, being Latino and like brujeria and stuff? Like, is there a component to that?
Yeah, probably on some level. And it's probably also because of work too, of what I do as archaeology and stuff. I actually bump into a lot of quote unquote Wiccan people around
Okay.
because they're trying to reconnect with older stuff and they're nerdy
Oh,
like me, but they use it in a different way. They're like, oh yeah, we know this is like a powerful plan and blah blah blah. I'm like, oh yeah, it is. And so yeah, I bump into that too. And there, yeah, there is definitely a brujeria element too. Of course, yeah. Yeah, yeah, both of us with our different Latino backgrounds. Yeah, of course, yeah.
I think also, like I was when you were speaking, I was thinking, how interesting that someone that has an anthropology or archaeology background, and someone that has like a psychology background like me, right? Like how we're going to conceptualize things very differently, just based on like obviously we picked our careers because these were natural interests we had, right? But like the way we talk about things. And I was actually an English major in undergrad, and talking to you reminds me like, oh, like when you're reading, when I would read, whatever famous American novels or whatever, in my classes, I would be looking to write my papers, right? Like on for the symbolic meanings and whatever, right? And so hearing you talk kind of reminds me, oh, like if I thought about it like that way, right? Like from that lens versus like what I've been doing for the last 20 years, um, I would talk about it differently, with like the dragon and things like that. Um, just interesting how we speak about things because we
Yeah.
conceptualize the world differently.
Yeah, yeah. So how would you talk about the dragon or AKA Sue? How would you talk about it?
I never knew she was a dragon. I missed the robe. I missed. How would I talk about her? I mean, I kind of feel bad for her because she's so like naive. I didn't really feel an anger towards her for like being mean and like basically like killing parts because yeah, I saw them as the same person, but yeah, I also kind of gave her a pass. I was like, she doesn't really know what she's doing, she's just kind of living her life from like this naive, like I'll take what the world can give me, getting I don't this is the feedback I get from the world, so yeah, I'm going to be a completely selfish human. So I guess I blame society a lot too. I didn't just blame her.
Wow. Very powerful. Yeah. I hope people enjoyed all the empowerment insight that we're getting from this awesome conversation for Reina. No, that's awesome.
But I think it's also how, like, I don't know. I it's very much like building women up, because if we look at younger women, we're like, ew, and it's just like that's just like an insecurity, right? Versus like you can see a woman and be like, wow, she's beautiful, regardless, you know. Um, I wish for women not to be insecure and to be kind to each other. So yeah, Sue's cool. And yeah, she could have behaved better. We can all behave better. And we all need to be held responsible for our behavior too. Just because she's young and pretty, she shouldn't be seen as, you know, more evil.
Yeah, fair. 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 What do you think about the crazy final arc? Like just her being desperate and her like becoming this monster somehow going past by like a producer. Oh yeah, like, to me, I don't think that even happened. I think I don't know. I'm like, "What?" Or maybe it did. Maybe to prove the point that, like, they really don't care. They're just really all about just having some exploitation to have somebody host the New York Eve event. But what do you I don't know, like, what comes to your mind about the monster, like, psychologically speaking, right? Or the fact that she even did it knowing the dangers of it, like, I don't know, like, what did that do for you, like, when you were watching that?
Well, yeah, it was gross.
Yeah, for sure.
That was the first reaction. Getting past that, yeah, I think like it shows, yeah, how desperate people are, right? And like that was her moment, right? She wasn't gonna let it go. And yeah, we hold on to those big moments in life, right? That one chance when it's not really just one chance, right? It's just life has chances that look different ways or maybe won't get the same kind of attention, but it doesn't mean it can't mean a lot to you. And yeah, I mean, I felt sad that she was standing up there looking so gross, you know. I mean, obviously that wasn't who, I mean, obviously since that's not real, right? Like no one looks like that, but that maybe if we see it as like that's the way she saw herself, like she pictured herself being that really gross slug looking thing. Um that would make more sense to me.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then the fact too that like uh I'm trying to think a clever way to say this. I don't think there's a clever all the bosoms she produced, right? And then she
Oh,
vomited a bosom, right? So like the obsession with just like sexual exploitation of women, right? And I know
oh
like the film does some booty shots, it's just to kind of prove it too, but I know it all, but there's also that layer to it too, right? And when you look at her, she has like a bunch of them, they're like everywhere, right? And then they show you like little girls in the crowd excited to see this event, and you're like, what? Like that shouldn't be okay, right? And it's not from a position of shame, right? Because sex shouldn't be
yeah.
shamed and things like that. But it's yeah, just yeah, I don't know. There's a lot there. I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you could like when she was first so naked, I was like, "Whoa, like she's so naked." And then I was like, "Well, this isn't the point of this." Like I think sometimes, you know, women being naked is to sell for sexual purposes most of the time, I'd say. And so I think I quickly go to like, well, like we're just showing people's naked bodies like to make money, which I don't like. But this was certainly not. Then really quickly I went to like, well, that's not the point of this.
And then, like, the blood afterwards, right? I think we talked about it in a different conversation that, like, going back to the whole dragon theme, I think that was supposed to almost be like her spitting fire and, like, all the blood too,
Mm,
but then I also think it's also kind of poetic because it talks about, like, the suffers and trials that women go through in general, whether that's, like, through their like menstruation cycle, ovulation cycle, giving birth, like periods, all the
mhm. Yeah,
pain,
I thought about that.
men sucking, female sucking, non-gender binary transitions, whatever it is, like it's like you guys all suck. I don't know.
I agree. I agree. I like to talk about that when I start getting hot flashes. I'm like, oh, it never ends. Never ends. You'll never understand it, right? Yeah, I get it. Um, Do you think, I mean, when you were like, because obviously the gore was like the number one thing that hit me at first, and then I had to like move past that. Like I don't feel like, and this is again, you watch a lot more movies than I do. But for me, it's like I feel like people aren't like they're not gonna get past it, but I just might be really impressionable, but I feel like will people miss the all of this because they're gonna just be like, ooh, gore, and like that's what they're gonna, you know? Or do you feel like people that just want that won't even watch this movie? They'll watch something else.
everybody that I've talked to about this film has always given me completely unique takeaways from it. It's one of the things that I was so excited to talk to you about.
Huh.
So I'll say yes, answer your question. Yeah, people do get like frozen in the gore, but from different scenes. And then they give me different feedback. Like from her first transformation, like some people can't even get through that. And then they kind of watch, but they're kind of listening, right? But I think the point is still I think you still can get the theme of it, right? The ridiculousness of it. But yeah, no, people have different levels to it. Or like for some people, the part that was worse for them is when Sue is like, I think it has to be like 2 or 3 months where she's just draining. When Sue's draining Elisabeth and she's like dating this guy and like the muscular, good-looking guy, and for them that scene was too much to see like elderly Demi Moore, Elizabeth Sue's character, and it wasn't even the gore of it. Just that part was just like way too hard for
Wow.
them to watch.
Interesting.
So I've heard completely different things from completely different people.
Mm.
But yeah, this is definitely one of those films where it's like, rated R and like 17 and up. I don't, yeah, I don't think people will get it. I think this is one of those films that you have to watch more than once. It like forces you to. I don't,
Had
yeah,
to. I had to. Yeah. I was like once, yeah, I had to watch it more than once to be with some of it, right? Because I just am not desensitized. So I don't watch movies that have that level of gore unless
yeah,
requested.
yeah, and
Or I don't know, but it's interesting because you wouldn't have known. Like, I feel like my context of the movie really was like I watched the Golden Globes and she got nominated, but they don't when they show the snippet of it, like I can tell really quickly, like, ew, gross. I have no interest in watching that, right? And this movie doesn't focus on that in the snippets that it's gory. It could hide it very well. Because the beginning you're like, oh, this is interesting. Like, oh, there's an eggs frying. Like, there's cool visual effects. Oh, and then it's just like, wait. And I think the first moment that strikes you, which is fine, like when the car accident, just the of it, right?
sure.
That's the first clue that it's like, oh, this is going to be intense. This isn't a movie that you can just easily go to bed after by yourself in a hotel room.
Sorry, Raina.
Just joking. But yeah, we all have different levels of,
What'd you think about like the final quote unquote ending and her crawling back to like her Hollywood walk of fame?
this. I felt sad because I would want to tell her, like, there's more to your life than just that.
Yeah.
Like, it's important to be dynamic as a person, right? I think it just, freaking speaking from, working with clients, when they just have one thing that they put their whole life into, like, yeah, sure, they're very successful in that, but that's not usually healthy.
No, absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely. No, yeah, that was one of your first comments about identity. Yeah, identity is like, yeah, we're multi-layered, and I think we also need like multi-layers or ways of like having fun or having like cathartic experiences. We can't like just depend on your passion to be like the only way that you release your frustrations, right? You can like listen to music, watch TV, or read a book, be with nature, meditate, physical activity, like what, like like the dependent on it too, like yeah, and it sucks too, right? Because like in this point of the career, in her character, she's like an Oscar-winning actress, but she was like a fitness person, so it's unfortunate. You would think that she would maybe get some other benefits from it, but to your earlier comment of isolation, right? It's yeah. Do you think that happened though? I don't. I Because in my opinion, I think the end of the film is when Sue kills Elizabeth. I think that, or am I remembering that right? But then she also goes and does like, yeah, like I don't think the Elizabeth monster suit. I don't think any of that actually happened. I don't. But I
But
think it works both ways. Like, I think, like, yeah, I think it was, like, almost like a lucid dream, like, she's dying,
Oh,
this is, like, her
sure.
life. This is, like, instead of having, like, a positive lucid dream, DMT, as she's, like, dying, this is, like, the nightmare that she had in her brain because it was a nightmare, to your earlier point, that she messed up her moment, right? Or if it did happen and she became this quote unquote monster, right? Or however she saw herself with a bunch of what did I say? Bosoms? I don't know. Breasts. I don't know if I even can say that. Like all over the place. And
Well, going back to my SNL comment, you know, like I didn't see any of that. Like, no. Yeah, for me, it was like, sure. I mean, yeah, I think that since that can't really happen now in this world, maybe in future worlds, it would be interesting, right? If like what we actually thought about ourselves could be outwardly expressed. You imagine? I mean, that would be people would probably be much more careful with what they think, right? That would be really interesting, right? Like if like you think about yourself in a negative way, like I'm like, oh no, I have a gun, I have a gray hair, and then like suddenly like my finger starts atrophying, right? Like I might be much more careful. So maybe that would be a good thing. Um, you know, like in cognitive behavioral therapy, it's very much about, right, that work of um like what you think and feel and what you think impacts feelings and behaviors and just goes very different ways, right? So, you know.
dang, that's no, that's dude. You dropped a big bomb with your little comment. I don't even know what to
Oh,
say
we
to
gotta
that.
end things. That's what clients do to me at the very end. Oh, and by the way, Reina, thank you for that. Let's leave you with that
Dude.
for next week. Yeah.
Dude, see, but then see when you say something like that, then that makes me go the other way and be like, dang, maybe it was real. Maybe it was her psychological because I think Sue is part of her like what she didn't resolve within her psychology, right? And to your earlier comment, if what she like perceived or what she thought of what she was is what she became, so that maybe it did happen. No.
Well, I mean, but I feel like, you know, we broke up, but my ex, you know, Timmy, you know, he said in an interview that like and people when people or often when people ask him like what does this mean, it's like it's up to the interpretation of the viewer, right? So like I think we're, you know, whatever it is that we think is fine, and I tend to take things like they're trying to convey whatever it is that they're putting there, and maybe I should be thinking more beyond that, but like, I don't know. I don't like, it's like, yeah, this happened in the movie. It's like,
No, sure, yeah. Timothy Chalamet is what she meant, by the way, if you can catch it. Timmy comment.
shout out if you watch this. We can talk about. Um, no, but yeah, excellent actor. You don't really need a $2 million house that he There's another example though, I could use that, right? Like the way my perception was like, oh, he's gonna live in like a small apartment in New York forever because he doesn't need more things, right? I don't understand why he needs a big house. That was just my perception, right? Like based on whatever, him using some big words. So, yeah.
Just no, thank you for your time. Thank you for all this like mindful insight. I'll definitely let you go in a bit, but you just keep dropping bombs on me. Like
I
you
know
just
how it
keep
feels to have my job. That's what people
is
do to
that
me.
what's happening?
That's what they do at the end of sessions. They're like, and by the way, I'm like, well, thanks. No time to process that. And then I have to think about it for a while and be worried and like, what? You know, clients have a tendency to do that.
No, yeah, no, perception definitely is reality. No, yeah, yeah. Yeah. That within itself could like open up a lot of things.
The
You
thinking thing is interesting though, because that's why I was like, I want to have a conversation, right? Because I feel like even when I'm working with clients, right? Like that's where the juice is, right? Like some clients, some therapists will like read the referrals and read everything and for me, it's like it's in the conversation and the connection that cool things come up, right? And that you like that's how I work with people, right? So like thinking I didn't actually hadn't thought about before we talked about how like our thoughts can make us like imagine if our thoughts could be physically like represented, and sometimes I believe like there's a such strong mind body connection, right? And so that I like stress is, and anxiety, depression is always a part of the pie of illness, right? And physical illness, right? So like it does actually happen, maybe more internally, but yeah, you get a zit if you're stressed, right? Like so it does come out actually physically, right? So I think that that could be an interesting. I'd love to ask the director about that. you know,
Right? No, honestly
right?
too. No, there's just there's so much to talk about this film. There's like so many
Love this
layers.
movie.
Dude, like as a man, you just keep giving me gem after gem after gem. Do you what would you diagnose like or would you diagnose them separately? Or maybe you could even diagnose Harvey, the douchebag executive. I don't know
I
who
always
could
diagnose
diagnose.
them with the same thing. Go away. No, yeah, I mean, like, I think I've talked to you before about my stance on diagnosis. It's important for treatment. But I don't hate I it's fine. But like, I don't know. I mean, obviously she has depression, body dysphoria. That's like very right, obviously. Um, yeah, she's got a lot of stuff. PTSD. Um, yeah, poor
Oh yeah,
thing.
a lot of PTSD, right? Her little snow globe, her like painting of her in her prime. That's like the centerpiece of her background.
I know. Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
sad.
yeah. No, no, I hear you. I'm definitely not team diagnosis either, because sometimes people get fixated on this and they treat it like a sickness,
Right.
and they miss the whole point of the
Yeah,
whole
they
like.
missed the whole point. It's like, no, this isn't the point. Like, yeah, I don't want you to put yourself in a box. And it's useful for treatment.
Okay, so that's the thing. We don't gotta diagnose them. We just
We should start a series of the of our takes on movies. You can have me assign me movies that that'll make me traumatized.
oh
And
god,
then I have
no.
to work through all of that in order to get to the it's like a challenge, right? Because I can't just focus on the people. I have to be like, oh, and why'd they do that? No.
I'd be open to it, but I'll promise it won't all be like super scary or crazy.
I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you. I just had no idea. Like usually
How
you know, say usually you know when a movie is like that because that's the point of the movie, right? So that's all over the trailers, like blood and bleh, and like that's not the point of the movie. It's used as a vehicle for something.
No, good point. Good point. Yeah, I wonder if people got upset about that too, right? To
I'm
like
sure.
yeah, because I
And
know my
yeah,
brother-in-law didn't really care for this movie. He thought it was okay, but he didn't think it was great. I'm just like, "What?" But, that was their experience, right?
well, I think that if you are not desensitized, if you wouldn't have forced me, honestly, if I wouldn't have like made the commitment to you, there's no way I probably wouldn't have continued to watch the movie after the gore. I would have been like this. I don't like these kind. I would have been so judgmental. I don't like these kinds of movies, you know, and like that would have been a turn off. That's why I was like, "Are you sure?" Like with your thing of like, if you wouldn't have explained to me, like, yeah, Gen Z needs this, like because they're so whatever used to being overstimulated. Um, I would have been like, why do they have to do this? Right.
No,
And
yeah.
so,
Definitely, they're
you know,
super desensitized for sure. Yeah,
I
just
get it.
the
Yeah.
things that my nephews show me that I'm like, "What the heck?" And yeah, sometimes they need to be aggressive for the mess for that someone to get the message, you know?
Yeah. And that's, yeah. But yeah, if you're not in that group of people, you have to work through that. Be
No,
willing to. So
no, yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's yeah, would you recommend like how do you recommend this film? It's tricky too, right? No, you brought up a good point. I'm like,
then
everyone's
I
getting
think,
yeah,
I
different
mean,
thoughts.
yeah, I think that for certain people, you might have to prepare them, right? Be like, hey, like if you know that they don't like those, if you know they don't like those kinds of movies, like be like, hey, you know what, like you're like be prepared, right, to work through that, um, so that you don't get stuck on it, because you could.
Yeah, because I think it's meant to be empowering, not because the message is empowering, but it's just like, don't let that happen. Like this is like an advisory, right? It's like,
Sure. It's kind of I liken it to like the Barbie movie, right? Like someone is like, "Oh, I don't want to watch a movie about Barbies," right? like imagine like a more masculine perspective, right? But then the movie is so much more layered than that, where you would miss, right? Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
so
You missed
similar type of thing.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that movie also, yeah, I bet that movie very differently, right? Like, they don't I think I didn't expect that movie to have so many layers to it, and so, like, I really appreciated that, but I may have not watched it if I thought I was gonna go in for, like, a light, fun movie. Or, well, you know what? That was another movie that a client recommended. I wasn't gonna see that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but
And
she's like,
then
"I think you would really like it," and I was like, "Oh,
to
okay, I'll
full
see it."
circle your SNL joke, right? The crazy loopy Barbie is that actress that you just talked about.
We can end.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
So
love those sketches. Yeah, that's not what happened for me. Yeah,
no, well, no, yeah. Thanks again, Reina.
it was
Thanks for
fun.
taking the time.
To
I
do it.
know
We
you're
should do it again if you want. I like being asked to watch movies, because
okay.
I couldn't do it, otherwise. I wouldn't maybe have time for it.
No, I
Uh,
understand. You have a lot of different hats. You're a super mom trying to make things work and helping out different communities. So thank you so much for your insight. This was super fun.
watch Arturo. It's amazing.
Oh,
He's like a
thank you.
super smart dude. Good human. So, and yeah, if anything for women, like, you know, feel good about yourself because life's short. And you don't want, what if it's true that our thoughts are creating us to be looking like monsters? We don't want that. So,
Cool.
all
Don't
right.
become that, but cool for the thought.
Yeah, it was
And yeah, thank you guys for checking out another AZ Ray video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.